Hey there, nation, and welcome to the show where we help you to play miniatures wargaming on a budget. It is I, Commander Cheapskate, and welcome to another episode of Anarchy Road, our vehicle-based narrative Necromunda campaign that is set in the Ash Wastes. And this is Battle Report number 76. It is a border dispute scenario that is played between the kiddo as well as myself. So in case of MIAs, Paper Planes did not give it away, which is the theme song for my littlest sister, the kiddo. The two of us will be throwing it down in a border dispute. She'll be playing the Prophets of Rage, a House Cawdor gang, and I'll be bringing the Jury of House Orlock. So we're going to play some background music real quick. As the music is playing, we will show you photos of both gangs as well as their rosters. If you want to see exactly what we're bringing for this one, go ahead and pause and take a look at your own leisure. So that being said, let's get this battle report on a roll.
Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, dying times here.
So the scenario rules for this one is border dispute. For the crews, both gangs earn D3 plus 3 fighters for their starting crew, and the remainders are placed within the reinforcement deck. For deployment, we both roll off for the half of the table, and we take one randomly chosen fighter who is deployed within 1 inch in the center of the table as well. We then take turns placing our vehicles on our own turf, and they must be at least 5 inches away from any edge of the battlefield. The objective is to either junk or hijack your enemy's vehicles. If a fighter is within 1 inch of an enemy's vehicle, they can make a junk action, which is a double action, in which case the fighter who junks the vehicle earns D3 experience points. It's supposed to be to represent the fact that they defaced your vehicle of some sort. Or better yet, if you can hijack it, that'd be even better. For reinforcements, at the start of each end phase, each player rolls a D3 and receives that many fighters. For victory conditions, the first gang to either hijack or junk their enemy's vehicle is the winner. For rewards, if a gang's vehicle is not junked or hijacked, it earns D6 times 10 credits, otherwise it earns D3 times 10 credits. For experience, each participant earns 1 point of experience, while the winning gang leader earns a bonus experience point. For reputation, if you're fighting against each other for the very first time, which in this case we are, we get 1 point of reputation. You lose 2 points of reputation if you have your vehicle hijacked or junked. However, if you junk or hijack your enemy's vehicle, you earn 2 points of reputation. And of course, if any gang bottles out, they lose 1 point of reputation. So the scenario rules over with. Let's go and talk about the battle plan real quick. So here is an overhead shot of the entirety of the battlefield. As you can see, we are playing on a 4x6 table. The kiddo, as well as the Prophets of Rage, are deployed on the left-hand side of the table, and my gang is deployed on the right-hand side of the table. Now this one could be kind of interesting, and the reason why is because unfortunately my sister, the kiddo, is playing on a major handicap. During her last battle report, over half her gang went into grievous injuries, so because of that, over half her gang is currently in recovery. That's the reason why she made a guild alliance real quick with the House of Iron. If you guys looked at our previous photo for the rosters as well as the photo of the gang, you would have noticed 5 different looking fighters, and the reason why is because she made a guild alliance with the House of Iron in order to provide backup, in which case she got 5 hive scum that she got managed for the scenario and managed to use them for her gang, because unfortunately she needs the number in order to survive. And the reason why we're starting to do guild and criminal alliances in this campaign is because my buddy Iron Major kind of set the tone when he asked me, basically as the arbitrator, if he brings in a guild member into makes a guild alliance, does he have to pay for the guild to be fed? Because according to the Band Apart rules, even though they're fighting for your gang, they're not necessarily part of your gang. So because of that, you don't need to take any of your resources in order to do that. So I ruled that if you have those members in your gang or make those kind of alliances, you don't need to take care of them for starvation rules. Well, once that started, everybody and their brother started grabbing criminal as well as guild alliances as well. And I did exactly the same thing. I decided to take up a criminal alliance just because I wanted to try out that game mechanic. I never really used it before, and I got myself an alliance of cult traders because they have some pretty good void-born scum where I actually have some really good stats, and also get a free Xenos weapon at the same time. So that was the reason why I made that alliance. So because of that, this battle is kind of different because we don't have any real control over which fighters are showing up for this scenario, because it's all randomly chosen. Pretty much my plan is just to delay the inevitable for the most part. I'm going to try to fight and try to bog down the kiddo's forces right in the center of the table, while at the same time I allow my reinforcements to show up to mount my vehicles, and then my plan is to then assault her Cathedral of Rage, which is located on the left-hand side of the battlefield. Hopefully I can attack it, drive off the crew off that vehicle, and either hijack it or junk it in some sense. And that's pretty much what my plan is for the most part. It's kind of like a delaying tactic. I'm trying to keep her on her side of the table until I get enough fighters on my end because I have the numbers and she doesn't. And then once I get enough fighters, I'm planning on just storming her and just taking her out with just sheer numbers. And that's pretty much the battle plan I'm going with this one. So with the battle plan over, let's go and talk about deployment real fast. Alright, so let's go and talk about deployment for the Prophets of Rage. So right in the middle of the table, we have two randomly chosen fighters that must be within 1 inch of the center of the table. On the left-hand side, that is Lanky. He is a Cawdor ganger who's armed with flak armor as well as a pole arm as well as auto gun attached to it. Now right across from him is one of my gunners. His name is Tetsuo. He's got mesh armor as well as auto pistol, a fine knife, as well as a specialist skill. Now typically speaking, Tetsuo is not really kitted out for fighting in actual gang fights. He's actually meant to be the gunner of my vehicle, the Tumbler. I basically just keep him on the vehicle to operate all the heavy weapons on it. So because that him being out in the open, he's not exactly optimized for fighting, but you know, them's the breaks when it comes to randomly drawing your crews. So continuing on with the rest of the gang, in the bottom right hand corner we have the Pig Killer. He's a hive scummer. He's armed with mesh armor. He's got a shotgun with solid and scatter shot as well as a stub gun and a maul. And at the top of the deployment area, hiding behind that vehicle as well, are two more members who are hive scum as well. These guys are all members of the Guild of Iron. In the back there we have Tova. He's a hive scum. He's armed with mesh armor. He's got a stub gun maul as well as a frag grenades. And right next to him is Mayday, another hive scummer. She's armed with mesh armor. She's got a long last rifle as well as stub gun and dum-dum rounds as well as a maul. And finally, on the left-hand side of the battlefield near the deployment area is the Cathedral Rage. It is a large type hulled vehicle. It's got a weapons cache with burner sticks, polecat boarding pikes, 2 crow's nests, boarding spikes to repel boarders. It's also got an enclosed crew, spare parts chest, as well as a tool locker. Now, unfortunately for the kiddo, she is kind of fighting a handicap on this one because she took a beating in her very first Necromunda battle. And because of that, she got some serious damage done to the hull of her vehicle. She's only got one wound left on the hull of her vehicle out of the 4 that she has. So because of that, she wasn't able to repair it from the last battle report, so this vehicle is somewhat handicapped. Also, she also got spare tracks as well for her vehicle. Now, mounting that vehicle on the back left, that is Ada the Conflagrant. She is the leader of her gang. She's got flak armor, a hand flamer with a cult icon, as well as a commanding presence ability. And right across from her is Gisbamin the Exemplar, who's a champion armed with flak armor. He's packing a heavy crossbow with frag and cracker shells. He's got a stub gun with dum-dum rounds, as well as a rain of blows ability. And that pretty much makes up the kiddo's deployment for this one. Now on to the deployment for the jury. Unfortunately for me, most of my fighters who are either cold traders or as well as hanger-ons are the ones who actually showed up for this battle report. On the top there, that character's name is Sulako. He's a ammo jack. He's got mesh armor, a bolt gun, a power hammer, as well as a munitioneer skill. Right next to him is Mr. Slick, who's a bosun. He's a cold trader who's got mesh armor, a shotgun with solid and scatter shot, a fighting knife, as well as a dodge skill. And right next on the left-hand side, that is Wesley. He is a cold trader. He's got an armor weave armor, a sling gun, stiletto knife, a bio booster. He's got the step aside as well as the overseer skill. Now, in the back of my deployment area, I got 2 wreckers who are showing up for this battle report. On the top, that character's name is Tango. He's a wrecker who's got flak armor, twin stub guns with dum-dum rounds, as well as a fighting knife. He's also got a jump booster. He's got the hot-headed and fast learner special rules, as well as the gunfighter skill, so he can shoot with both guns. Super deadly, that guy. Right next to him on the bottom there, that is Race. She's a wrecker who's armed with flak armor. She's got a stub gun, dum-dum rounds, a fighting knife, as well as a jump booster. And she's also got the hot-headed as well as the fast learner special rules attached to her as well. Now, back here in my deployment area, I also have both of my vehicles as well. On the top is the Tumbler. It is a large hull vehicle. It is the main vehicle for my gang. It's got weapons cache, boomsticks, a tool locker, spare parts chest, polecat boarding pikes, boarding spikes, as well as a comms network. It's also got 2 kill switches on the engine. It's got spare tires. It's got a turret-mounted harpoon cannon with a chain winch. I'm sorry, that's pistol meta. I'm sorry. It's also got a turret-mounted grabbing claw, as well as a heavy stubber that is mounted on the hull. And right below it is the Shipbreaker. It is a small type hull type vehicle. It's got tool lockers as well as boarding spikes. It's got 2 kill switches on the engine. It's got spare hydraulics to the legs, so that way it can continue walking. And it's also got a hull mounted last cannon. And that pretty much makes my deployment for this one. So deployment over with, we go directly to the top of turn number 1, and both the kiddo and I roll off for priority to see which of us will be going first. And with that, that takes us directly to the top of turn number 1, and the Cawdor get to go first on this one. So the kiddo, for her very first activation, decides to activate her ganger Lanky. Lanky charges directly into Tetsuo, engages him in close combat. He's armed with a pole arm, so he gets +1 to his strength. But luckily for me, though, my little sister kiddo, though, she just kind of failed her rolls. Either One of her attacks she failed because she failed to hit, the other one failed to wound, so because of that, they're still kind of stuck in close combat for the most part. So instead of activating Tetsuo, because I know that Lanky's not going anywhere, I decided to do a activation for Wesley, my Cold Trader. I decided to have him use his Overseer ability, which means he can give double set of actions to one of his own fighters within his crew. In this case, I actually put that Overseer ability on Mr. Slick the Bosun. So the first thing that he actually does, he actually moves up forward his normal moon allowance, and then opens fire with a solid slug directly into Mayday. He then, for his second set of actions, also moves up forward his normal moon allowance and then fires another shot, this time with another slug at the Pig Killer as well. So he moves twice and fires twice. And both shots were absolutely fantastic. For the very first one for Mayday, she not only did she get hit and wounded as well, but she also gets a flesh wound, and she's also seriously injured, so she is currently on the ground bleeding out right now. And exactly the same thing ends up happening for the Pig Killer. Not only does he get hit and wounded as well, a serious injury is put on that guy as well, so he's currently laying on the ground bleeding out. Now luckily for the kiddo, Tova, which is the scum who's up there in the top next to Mayday, he managed to pass his cool test, so because he stands his ground for the most part, but just like that, 2 members of the kiddo's crew are currently down and bleeding. So we go to the kiddo's activation. She does a group activation with Otto the Conflagrant, who uses her commanding presence ability to also activate Gismian the Exemplar, who's also the champion. Both those characters do intelligence checks in order to repair their vehicle. They manage to heal 2 wounds on the hull, so they have 1 more point left on the hull before the hull for the Cathedral of Rage is fully healed up. So for my next activation, I then activate Sulaco, my ammo jack. He moves up his normal moon allowance, so that way he has a good line of sight directly into Mayday. I have open fire with his bolt gun directly into the fallen scummer. So not only did I manage to hit and wound her as well, I also managed to put 2 flesh wounds on her, which is absolutely fantastic, which means that even if the kiddo rolls a flesh wound for this character, she'll automatically go to action because she'll be completely out of flesh wounds by that point. So for our next activation, the kiddo then activates Tova. Tova actually scoots up about his normal moon allowance around the vehicle, so that he's got a good line of sight directly at my character Tetsuo is engaged in close combat. She does have a pot shot take off with his stub gun directly into Sulaco, but unfortunately for her though, she misses her shot, so no harm, no foul. I then activate Tetsuo, who fights against Lanky. Unfortunately for me though, I miss my attacks is what ended up happening. I just flowed my hit roll, so because of that, nothing much happens, and these 2 fighters are pretty much engaged in close combat. And since all of Kiddo's activations are all over with, the only thing that's left is for the rest of my gang to be activated. I then activate Tango, one of my wreckers. He travels something like 11 inches directly up to the top. I think he moves 11 inches. I think it's like 11 inches was the first burst of movement that he actually does. I do a second movement as well. I forgot how far he gets. I think it goes up to 18 inches what it ends up having for him. And the reason why he's able to move so quickly is because for the overcharge ability on my wreckers, I do have an engineer, a grease monkey named Blackfinger's his name, and because of that, with his overcharge ability, instead of adding D3 for their overcharge rolls, I can actually roll D6, so that part was absolutely fantastic. So Tango is just hauling across the battlefield. And Reese, my second record, does exactly the same thing, flying over the MCI Chemical Works, heading directly towards the Cawdor. So with that, we go directly to the end phase, and during the end phase we get reinforcements. The kiddo actually gets 3 more fighters added onto the table. That's Avot, Dromos, as well as I believe the guy's name is Mumblestock is his name. All 3 of those fighters show up on her table edge, so that way they can also start participating in the next turn. And the same thing happens to me. Unfortunately though, I rolled only a 1 for my reinforcements, so because of that, when I went through my random deck to see who was going to come up next, it ended up being Sorter. He's one of my gunners, and he's also the driver for the Shipbreaker as well. So with the reinforcements done falling onto the table, the next thing you need to do now is roll for injuries. In this case, the kiddo has to roll injuries for both Mayday as well as for the Pig Killer. Unfortunately for her, she rolled another flesh wound for Mayday, so because of that, Mayday does go out of action. However, there is a silver lining on this. She is a hive scum who's been hired by the Guild of Iron, so the kiddo really doesn't have to really worry about making lasting injury rolls for that character because she automatically makes a full recovery. However, for the Pig Killer though, he suffers another serious injury, so he is still laying on the ground and he is still bleeding out. So here's an overhead shot at the end of turn number 1 on the battlefield. As you can see, all kinds of chaos is erupting in the center of the battlefield between Tetsuo as well as Lanky. At the same time, as you can see, my wreckers are moving across the battlefield as quick as they can in order to engage the Cawdor. Meanwhile, the Cawdor still have their vehicle, the Cathedral of Rage, in the back left-hand corner of the battlefield. Kiddo also has 3 more fighters showing up at the table in order to help out her fighters as well. At the same time, I actually have one of the drivers for my Shipbreaker show up on the bottom right-hand corner as well. So with turn number 1 over with, we go directly to the top of turn number 2, and both the kiddo and I roll off for our initiative to see which of us will be going first. So with that, we go directly to the top at turn number 2, and the Cawdor managed to get the initiative on this one, so the kiddo will be going first. And for her first activation, she activates Tova, her Hive Scum, who charges directly into Tetsuo and catching him in a pincer attack between Lanky as well as Tova. Unfortunately for me, Tova was able to successfully wound Tetsuo, and to make matters worse, managed to put a serious injury on him, so that part was horrific. So because of that, Tetsuo is currently laying on the ground and he is bleeding out, which means I have to move very quickly, because if I'm not careful, Lanky, which is the Cawdor fighter with the polearm, all he has to do is just do a coup de grace, and he can finish off my gunner with no problem. So in order to solve that problem, I once again decide to activate my Cold Trader Wesley, who then uses his Overseer ability directly onto Mr. Slick. So what ends up happening is that Mr. Slick actually does a charge directly into Lanky, engages him in close combat as well. Unfortunately for me though, for that first round of close combat, nothing much really happens. I just failed to hit for the most part. After all, Mr. Slick is a bosun, he only has a 5-up weapon skill, so because I'm not very good at that point. So that was his first set of actions. The second set of actions, I have him fight one more time, and the second time was a charm in this case. Not only did I hit Lanky as well, I also injured him as well, managed to slip through his armor save, put a serious injury on him directly, so because of that, Lanky goes crashing face down on the ground, and he is currently bleeding out, which buys some time for me to recover Tetsuo, either with a recovery roll of some sort, or if somebody charged directly into Tova and take that guy out of it, and take that guy out too. So with that, we go directly to the kiddo's turn. For her activation, she activates out of the Conflagrant, who also does a group activation using her Commanding Presence ability for Avo, as well as for Mumblestock, as well as for Dromos. Now Dromos, Avot, as well as Mumblestock, all three of those characters spend bubble actions in order to board their own vehicle and also to get on board. At the same time, the kiddo does try to roll for her intelligence check for repair for the vehicle, but unfortunately for those, she rolls Snake Eyes for out of the Conflagrant, so not much really happens there. So for my next activation, I then activate Reese, my wrecker. She charges directly into the Pig Killer and finishes him off with a coup de grace, putting that fighter directly out of action, and at the same time netting herself a bonus experience point, which is all kinds of awesome. So because of that, for our next activation real quick, she then activates her champion Gisman the Exemplar, and Gisman the Exemplar actually does another intelligence check and manages to heal up the last wound directly onto the Cathedral of Rage. And so for my next activation, I then activate Tango, my other wrecker, who charges directly into Tova and engages him in close combat. Luckily for me, I got pretty successful in my close combat attacks, managed to put a serious injury as well as a flesh wound directly onto Tova, so Tova goes crashing face down into the wasteland dirt, and he is currently bleeding out and he is slowly dying. And since all of the kiddo's activations are fully used up, the rest of the turn is dedicated to my fighters. I then do a double activation with my Ammo Jack Sulaco, who does a double movement up directly to this melee that's taking place in the middle of the battlefield. So that way, if I get the initiative next turn, I can charge forward and finish off some enemy fighters with a coup de grace. I then activate Sorter, who does a simple action in order to move up to the Shipbreaker, and a basic action for him to board his own vehicle, so that when the next turn, he can start piloting the Shipbreaker and causing all kinds of damage. And in the end phase, since the kiddo has no more fighters that she can activate for reinforcements, I then go for my rolls. I then actually bring in 2 fighters. I bring in my leader, Riptor, who is a road captain armed with mesh armor. He's also got a Rocketatsi special, a double-bladed knife, as well as a Hrude Fusil, as well as Commanding Presence. Now the Hrude Fusil is actually a kind of like a plasma type weapon. It's actually a Xenos weapon, and that's because I actually have an alliance with the Cold Traders. Whenever I make an alliance with the Cold Traders, I get a randomly chosen Xenos weapon for my character, and that was the one that rolled up for us, so that part was kind of awesome. At the same time, I also my second gunner, Darkside, he shows up as well. He's got mesh armor, a Rocketatsi special, and a fighting knife, and he is the driver of the Tumbler, so that part was all kinds of awesome. So with that, we go directly to the recovery rolls, and as you can see in this photo, Tova is still seriously injured, same thing with Tetsuo, so that part is kind of sad. However, Lanky, though, he actually rolled up a flesh wound, so because he rolls over, because he's currently pinned, and he also has a flesh wound on him as well. Now, unfortunately, I forgot to take an overhead shot at the end of turn number 2, so I do apologize with that. So with that being said, we go directly to turn number 3, and both the kiddo and I roll off for priority to see which of us will be going first. Alright, so that takes us directly to the top of turn number 3, and this time I managed to get the priority. So this time what I decided to do was to charge in Sulaco. Sulaco goes directly into close combat with Lanky, and I'm actually looking for that combat because Sulaco is packing a power hammer. And needless to say, my Ammo Jack's look had no problem whatsoever putting the hurt directly onto Lanky, stoving his head in with that power hammer and putting him directly out of action as well. So because of that, the kiddo will need to roll up on the last string injury table to see exactly what happens to that fighter. So, not to be outdone, the kiddo then decides to go next. She activates Out of the Conflagrant, who does a group activation with the driver Mumblestock. Mumblestock actually rams directly into Reese, managed to cause a serious injury onto her, as well as putting on 2 flesh wounds. And to make matters worse, because when I rolled it for my injuries, I actually rolled up another flesh wound on top of that. So because that, Reese does go out of action, and she will need to roll on the serious injury table to see exactly what happens to her. At the same time, Mumblestock the driver earns an additional bonus experience point for taking an enemy fighter out of action. So for my next activation, I once again activate Tango, my wrecker, who does a quick coup de grace directly onto Tova and puts that guy out of action as well, and also needing a bonus experience point for my wrecker. And since the kiddo has no more fighters left to activate, that pretty much leaves the rest of the turn for me. So in this case, I do a simple action for both Riptor as well as Darkseid, doing a quick group activation on them. They also spend a basic action to climb on board the Tumbler. Darkseid is now in the driver's seat, while at the same time Riptor goes directly into the cab and get ready to ride and die for the most part. And once again, I do a group activation with Wesley, my coal trader, as well as Mr. Slick, my bosun. Wesley decides to use the Overseer ability for Mr. Slick, who does a series of double movements directly to get within range of the Prophet of Rage, to the Cathedral Rage. He then decides to do a charging action and board directly onto the Cathedral Rage as well. Luckily for me, though, I was able to pass my initiative test, and the reason why is because the Cathedral Rage has boarding spikes, which means that if you try to attempt to board a vehicle, you have to pass your initiative test. Luckily for me, I managed to roll a 6 on that one, so because it goes directly on board, and he engages Dromos directly into close combat. Unfortunately for me, though, I was unable to do anything to Dromos, so because of that, he just kind of stands his ground for the most part. The kiddo then activates Dromos, but unfortunately for her, though, she fails her close combat attacks, so nothing much happens there. I then activate Sulaco, who's one of my ammo jack, who does a double movement directly towards the Cathedral Rage, so that way he can do a boarding action on the next turn. And for my final activation, I then activate Sorter, who drives the Shipbreaker. He moves up 12 inches his normal movement allowance forward and does a basic action open fire with the last cannon directly at the Cathedral Rage. Unfortunately for me, though, I missed my shots, so nothing much really happened there. And with that, that takes directly to the end phase, and during the end phase, I rolled a 3 to bring on 3 more reinforcements. So I bring in Lemonhead, who's my road sergeant. He's my champion's armed with mesh armor, a combo bolter with a grenade launcher. He's got a fighting knife, stub gun with dum-dum rounds, as well as the Big Brother ability. At the same time, I also bring in my 2 Voidborn scum, Ghost and Noob. Both of those guys are armed with flak armor. Both of them have fighting knives. Ghost has an auto pistol, while Noob has a last pistol. Now, the interesting thing about these guys is that they actually have strength 5, toughness 5, 3 wounds, and 2 attacks apiece. So these guys are absolutely brutal in close combat. So I'm really looking forward to seeing exactly what these guys can do as well. However, during the recovery phase, I do roll an out of action result for Tetsuo, so because of that, Tetsuo does go out of action, and he will need to roll up on the lasting injuries table to see exactly what happens to him at the end of the scenario. Alright, so that takes directly to the end of turn number 3. So here's an overhead shot of the entirety of the battlefield. As you can see, things are not looking very good right now for the kiddo. She doesn't have very many fighters to begin with, and the ones that she does have are actually on board her vehicle, and most of them are hive scum. They're not even Cawdor gangers because of the number of losses she took in her last battle report. At the same time, I'm slowly getting more fighters showing up on the table edge right there on the right hand side. And I'm also pressing my advance directly to the Cathedral Rage. Hopefully I can take out the crew and either hijack or junk the vehicle, and then also win myself a victory on this one. So with that, we go directly to the top of turn number 4 for the Cawdor, and once again, the kiddo gets to go first on this one, so she does a group activation real quick, using Out of the Conflagrant to do a group activation for her driver, Mumblestock. Mumblestock actually turns the vehicle 90 degrees and then does a double action, another simple action to run directly into Sulaco. Actually managed to run that guy over as well. Not necessarily ramming the character, but just running him over with the vehicle in general. Unfortunately for my ammo jack Sulaco, he actually goes out of action on this one, so he really goes out of action. But luckily for me though, because he is a hanger-on, he doesn't need to really roll on the lasting injury table. He just makes a full recovery, so that part's kind of nice. I then activate my gang leader Riptor, who uses Commanding Presence ability to do a group activation for both Lemonhead as well as Ghost and Noob. All 3 of those fighters do simple actions to move up directly towards the Tumbler and another basic action to climb on board. So just like that, my entire guys are ready to drive off and to bring the pain. So at the same time, the kiddo then activates Avot, which is one of her hive scum. So I forgot to mention this before. During that group activation, she did try to activate Dromos, who tried to attack Mr. Slick. Luckily for me, though, she failed that activation. I wasn't able to cause any pain, so that part was kind of nice. So Avot actually has to step in and actually do some fighting as well. But unfortunately for her, though, Avot actually fails her attacks as well. So because of that, Mr. Slick is still engaged in close combat with these 2 hive scum. So for my next activation, then activate Sorter, who's driving the Shipbreaker. I actually take a basic action, so that way he gets a +1 to hit with his last cannon when he shoots, and another basic action, open fire with that thing. This time I'm aiming specifically for the engine on the Cathedral of Rage. Hopefully I can cripple that vehicle, so that way it doesn't move any further. And that's exactly what ends up happening. I managed to hit the engine for the Cathedral Rage, managed to put all 3 wounds directly onto the engine, and just like that, the engine is completely destroyed at this point. So you can see the engine is being destroyed, what that means is that the Cathedral Rage cannot move whatsoever, which means that the kiddo will have to dedicate turns in order to repair her engine, so that way she can actually start moving around again. And as you can see, we got that little beautiful flame column, smoke column that Iron Major made, which is just absolutely perfect for this game of Necromunda Anarchy Road, because whenever now we have damaged components on vehicles, we could put this little smoke pillar with the tea candle inside of it to lighten it up, so that way it looks like it's actually smoking and burning and things, and it looks absolutely fantastic. So Iron Major, once again, thank you very much for making those pillars of smoke, because they look absolutely fantastic on the battlefield, especially for Anarchy Road. Sorry, I know I'm gushing on this one, but we're just really lucky that we have him making terrain for us on this channel. So with that, I then send in Tango. Tango does a group activation real quick, does actually just charge directly into the vehicle and actually starts doing some close combat attacks with him. Hopefully it can bring the pain, because Tango is actually pretty devastating in close combat. So as you can see in this photo, I bring the pain in a huge way. So the first thing I actually managed to do, I managed to put Dromos directly out of action. So because of that, he's automatically out of the battle report. At the same time, I do manage to put a flesh wound directly onto, onto Avot, and Avot actually falls out of the vehicle because he gets shot with a stub gun. He fails his initiative test. He is just pinned right now with a flesh wound, but at the same time, though, I'll take what I can get. I then activate next with Wesley. Wesley does a simple action to move up forward to his normal moon allowance, and does another basic action to open fire with his sling gun. And in case you're wondering what a sling gun is, it's pretty much a shuriken catapult that's used by the Eldar. It's basically the same kind of weapon, because he's a cold traitor. In this case, he's opening fire directly onto Avot. Actually managed to hit him twice, but wound him once, but it was enough to actually put a serious injury on him. So because of that, Avot is currently bleeding on the ground right now with a flesh wound, which is all kinds of awesome. So for the kiddo's next activation, she activates Gispamin, the Exemplar, who charges directly into Mr. Slick. Unfortunately for her, though, she fails her attacks, so because of that, nothing much really happens from that. I then activate Darkside, who's the driver of the Tumbler, which then does a double movement with the Tumbler moving 16 inches across the battlefield, hitting as quick as they possibly can directly towards the Cathedral of Rage. So with that, we go directly to the end phase, and 2 more of my reinforcements show up. In this case, it's Johnny, my arms master. He's the guy on the top there. He's actually armed with mesh armor. He's got an arc hammer, as well as stub gun with dum-dum rounds. He's got the nerves of steel, as well as rule of iron special rules. At the same time, one of my gunners named Greenhorn, that's like my juvies, named Reptile, he shows up as well. He's armed with mesh armor. He's got a stub gun with dum-dum rounds, as well as a fighting knife. And during the recovery phase, Avot managed to recover with a flesh wound, so because they rolls over, because he's currently pinned, but he's carrying 2 flesh wounds on him at exactly the same time. And at this point of the battle report, that my little sister Kiddo realized that there's no way she's going to be able to pull off the victory on this one. So because of that, she automatically just kind of surrenders and just kind of ends the game and bottles out voluntarily, because she's only got, I think, 3 fighters left on her entire roster left on the battlefield, and there's just no way she's going to be able to pull the victory out on this one. So with that being said, ladies and gentlemen, we go directly to the after action report, to the post game, because this game is now officially over. Alright, now it's time for the after action report with the post game. So first off, starting off with the Prophets of Rage. So for her gang, she actually suffered a bunch of injuries for this one. Her ganger, Lanky, actually suffered a humiliating injury. So because of that, he goes directly into recovery and loses 1 to his leadership as well as for his cool. Now 4 for Hive Scum, Dromos, Tova, Mayday, as well as Pig Killer. All 4 of those fighters make full recoveries. No harm, no foul there. Now for her advancements, none of her gang members advance at this time, and from her territories, from her wasteland, she earned 1 point reputation. At the same time, also found a mineral outcropping, also getting plus 20 for her credits as well. At the same time, Otto the Conflagrant, Malila, and Gispamin the Exemplar remained behind to repair the Cathedral of Rage engine. So now the engine is perfectly fine. During the trading post, she managed to earn 30 credits from the scenario, as well as 20 credits from the wasteland, as well as 11 credits from her stash, giving her a grand total of 61 credits in total. She spent 45 of her credits in order to feed her gang to make sure they don't have to worry about starvation, and she played the remaining 16 credits into her stash as well. At the same time, she also decided to end the alliance with the Iron Guild, so because of that, she no longer receives their support. However, she took up an alliance with the Cold Traders instead, and the reason why is because I decided to dump the Cold Traders because I really didn't want to give up my gang leader for another battle report. What ends up happening is that whenever you're under an alliance with the Cold Traders, you have to worry about Imperial Entanglements is the name of the drawback rule, which means that one randomly chosen fighter can't participate in the next battle report because they're being investigated by the law. Well, if you refuse to follow that, you can break the alliance, and I decided to do that because I was not going to fight my next battle without my leader instead. So because of that, the Cold Traders left me, but the kiddo decided to pick those guys up instead. So because of that, Wesley, Mr. Slick, Ghost, and Noob have joined up with the Prophets of Rage in order to help them out as well. At the same time, Otto the Conflagrant was given a Hrud Fusil as part of the alliance as well, so that weapon now goes directly to her gang leader. Now, for her reputation, she earned 1 point of reputation from her territories, as well as 1 point of reputation for fighting against the jury for the very first time, which means that her grand total is now up to 4 points of reputation. Her new record now is at 0 wins and 2 losses, and her new gang rating now is at 2,130 points. So let's go ahead and talk about the jury now. So in this one, I actually lost 3 people in this one. Tetsuo, he actually makes a full recovery, so no harm, no foul there. However, Reese, my wrecker though, she suffers an enfeebling injury, which means that she loses 1 point to her toughness, and at the same time goes directly into recovery. Sulako, who's my ammo jack, he makes a full recovery, no problem, because he's a hanger-on. Now for my advancements, Johnny, my arms master, actually leveled up to level 2, and he learned the shotgun savant skill, which means now that the short range bonuses for shotguns get applied to long range shots as well, which is all kinds of awesome. So because of that, I decided to get him a Rocket Tansy special, but we'll talk about that in a second. Now for my territories, for my wastelands, I earned 1 point of reputation as well as 16 credits from that. For my grifter, I actually earned 70 points of credits from that, and for my workshop, I also earned 90 credits from that as well. Now because I won this scenario, I get a brand new piece of territory. I rolled up on the table and managed to get a farm, which is absolutely fantastic, because that means now that every single turn, every single game, I don't have to worry about starvation rules because my gang can just eat the food from the farm. And at the same time, I earned 30 credits from the farm as well, which is absolutely fantastic. So during the trading post sequence, I earned 50 credits from the scenario, as well as 206 credits from my territories, and when combined with the 75 credits I had in my stash, brings me my grand total of 331 credits in total. So like I said before, my gang leader Riptor was actually brought under the Imperial Entanglement rule. I decided to not follow it in order to break the alliance, so because of that, the Cold Traders are no longer partnered up with me. Instead, they actually partnered up with the kiddo, which is perfectly fine for me as far as I'm concerned. My reputation is actually pretty high, so I was very rarely able to get the Cold Traders to help me out again. So with my money, I bought a Rocket Tansy special for Johnny, since he's got that shotgun savant rule. At the same time, I also purchased demo charges for both Tango and Reese, my 2 wreckers. That way I can have them fly into a vehicle, plant the demo charge, they can rocket off and blow it up, and that'd be all kinds of awesome. At the same time, I also recruited 2 Cyber Mastiffs for Johnny, my arms master. Those dogs' names are Desir as well as Havan. And for those of you guys who are John Wick nuts out there, in John Wick 3, those are actually the name of the dogs that Halle Berry's character Sophia uses, Desir and Havan. So that's going to be really, really awesome. That's the reason why I named those dogs. At the same time, I also gave Johnny stub gun with his dum-dum rounds directly to Reese, my other wrecker, so that way she has 2 pistols. I then had 26 remaining credits left over, of which I put directly into the stash as well. Now for my territories, for my reputation, I earned 1 point of reputation for my territories, as well as 1 point of reputation from fighting against the Prophets of Rage for the very first time, which brings my grand total to 13 points. My new record now is at 4 wins and 0 losses, and my new gang rating now is at 3,635 points. So that's going to do it for this one, you guys. As always, please feel free to like, comment, and or subscribe. Your guys' input is invaluable to us as always. Also check us out on Facebook, Instagram, as well as blogger.com for all the latest, greatest hobby news related to our channel. We'll catch you guys in the next one. Peace out and stay classy.